The tiny boy lay crying on the blanket as 5 newborn puppies watched him, sensing a pain too deep for his small heart to carry. Since losing his mother, every night felt colder, his trembling hands searching for warmth that no longer answered his cries. The puppies, wobbling on tiny legs, inched closer, as though drawn to the grief that wrapped around the child like a shadow. Their soft bodies pressed against him, forming a fragile circle of comfort around a heart too young to understand loss. The room fell silent, the air heavy with emotion, as his sobs slowly softened beneath the gentle touch of tiny paws. A quiet calm settled in, as if fate itself paused to witness this fragile moment between pain, innocence, and hope. One puppy nudged his leg with a faint whine, a small question whispered through fur. "You're not alone anymore." His breathing steadied, each trembling inhale wrapped in the warmth that spread through the little bodies beside him. The puppies crawled closer, gathering around him like soft guardians determined to shield him from the emptiness. A subtle glow filled the room, the kind born when love appears in places no one expects, soft and overwhelming. His tiny hand drifted, landing on warm fur, and for the first time since the tragedy, a fragile peace touched his face. No one knew it then, but this night, filled with cries, warmth, and tiny hearts, was the beginning of something miraculous. The next morning arrived quietly, sunlight slipping through the curtains as the boy woke, surrounded by tiny sleeping guardians. Their soft breaths rose and fell in perfect rhythm, as if they had promised through the night to never leave his side again. He blinked away the last traces of yesterday's tears, his small fingers brushing gently across warm fur for comfort. The world still felt heavy, but something in the puppy's closeness whispered that pain didn't always last forever. One puppy lifted its head first, staring at him with sleepy eyes that held a strange kind of understanding. It crawled onto his chest, pressing its tiny heartbeat against his own, steadying the storm still hiding inside him. The boy didn't speak, couldn't speak, but the quiet bond between them grew like a fragile thread holding him together. The room felt different, safer, warmer, as if the puppies carried pieces of the love he thought he had lost forever. He curled closer to them, finding peace in the soft bundle of fur that wrapped around his loneliness like a blanket. Outside, the wind whispered through the walls, gentle this time, as though even it feared breaking the moment. The puppies nudged him softly, urging him out of his silence, reminding him he wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in days, a tiny sound escaped his lips, half sob, half laugh, as hope flickered inside him. As hours passed, the puppies followed him everywhere, their tiny paws pattering behind him like shadows that refused to fade. Even when he sat quietly in the corner, lost in memories he didn't understand, they gathered around to keep him steady. One nudged his hand, another leaned against his leg, and together they created a wall of warmth around his trembling heart. Though his eyes still held sadness, something new had begun to bloom beneath it, a fragile spark waiting to grow. Their presence filled the house with life again, tiny squeaks and playful nudges weaving joy back into silent rooms. The boy watched them stumble and roll, their clumsy innocence pulling a faint smile across his tired little face. Each time a puppy tumbled toward him, he reached out gently, as if guarding the only light left in his world. He didn't understand why they stayed so close, why they protected him, but he felt their love wrap around him like shelter. Even the floor seemed warmer with them near, as if the house itself breathed easier when he wasn't alone. One puppy barked a tiny sound, startling him before drawing out a small giggle that felt strange but comforting. The moment was brief, but it echoed loudly inside him, breaking another layer of the pain he carried. Little by little, the puppies stitched pieces of his broken world together with every soft nudge and gentle breath. Night arrived again, bringing the familiar ache of loneliness. But this time the boy wasn't facing it by himself. The puppies curled around him tightly, as if sensing the shadows that still haunted the corners of his fragile heart. He clutched the smallest one close, burying his face in the warm fur as memories of his mother flickered painfully. A soft whine rose from the pup, as though offering comfort words its tiny voice couldn't yet form. The boy's eyes shimmered with tears, but they didn't fall, not with a circle of warmth wrapped around him. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the house, but the puppies pressed closer, guarding him bravely. Every heartbeat he felt beside him became a reminder that love could return in forms he never expected. Another flash filled the room, but he didn't hide this time. He held the puppies tighter, trusting their presence. Their tiny paws rested on his chest, their warmth fighting back the storm howling beyond the walls. For the first time since the tragedy, fear loosened its grip on him, replaced by the steady comfort of belonging. The storm raged on, but inside the room, a quiet peace grew stronger than wind, thunder, or darkness. Wrapped in tiny bodies and soft breaths, the boy drifted into sleep, no longer afraid of the night. The next day brought a strange tension, as if the house sensed something approaching, something quietly life-changing. The boy sat with the puppies cuddled beside him, unaware that a neighbor had stopped outside after hearing the night's storm. The old woman peered through the window, shocked to see a small child alone, surrounded only by tiny newborn pups. Her breath caught as she realized the truth. Someone had left him behind, and the puppies had become his only family. Inside, the boy hugged the smallest pup tightly, unaware that this moment was about to change his life forever. The woman stepped back, unsure whether to knock, fearing she might frighten the child already clinging to survival. But fate doesn't wait for courage, and her hand rose slowly toward the door, trembling with uncertainty. Inside, the puppies suddenly perked up, ears twitching, sensing a presence approaching the quiet room. The boy's heartbeat quickened, confused by the shift in their behavior as they huddled closer to him protectively. A soft knock echoed through the house, gentle but heavy, carrying the weight of a new beginning or another sorrow. The boy froze, clutching the pups tighter, fear and hope colliding in his tiny chest as the knock came again. And in that suspended breath between silence and destiny, the door handle began to turn slowly. The door creaked open slowly, the old woman stepping inside with cautious breaths as the puppies growled softly in warning. Her eyes softened when she saw the frightened boy clutching the pups, his tiny shoulders shaking beneath their warm embrace. She knelt down slowly, keeping her voice gentle, afraid a louder tone might shatter the fragile calm he clung to. The puppies huddled protectively around him, their tiny bodies trembling but determined to guard the only family they knew. The woman whispered softly, asking his name, but he only pressed his face into the fur, too scared to answer. Outside, the wind howled faintly, as if urging her to act quickly before fear swallowed him whole again. She reached into her coat, pulling out a small blanket, placing it on the floor without moving closer to him. The puppies sniffed it cautiously, sensing no danger, and their growls softened into quiet whimpers. The woman waited patiently, letting silence settle gently, hoping trust might bloom in the stillness. The boy peeked up slowly, his red eyes reflecting confusion, fear, and a desperate hope he didn't understand. The woman offered a frail smile, one filled with warmth he hadn't felt since his mother's arms. And for a moment the room breathed differently, as though fate had paused to watch what he would do next. Minutes passed like hours as the boy studied her, clutching the smallest puppy as if it were his last shield. The woman kept her distance, letting her presence speak softly, reassuring him she meant no harm to him or the pups. She gently placed a small box of food on the floor, sliding it forward with a trembling hand full of compassion. The puppies perked up at the smell, though they refused to move without the boy's permission, loyal to the end. Hunger tugged at him, his tiny stomach growling louder than his fear, drawing his gaze toward the offering. The woman whispered again, telling him it was okay, her voice cracking with the weight of seeing such innocence alone. Slowly, he reached out, his hand shaking as he pushed a bit of food toward the pups before taking any for himself. The puppies wagged their tails weakly, nibbling as they kept glancing back at him to make sure he was safe. The woman watched silently, tears gathering as she saw how the child cared for them before even thinking of himself. Her heart broke and healed at the same time, witnessing the bond that held them all together through grief. The boy finally looked up at her again, this time with less fear, a fragile trust flickering like a candle. And in that flicker she saw hope, small, trembling, but alive, waiting for someone to help it grow. The woman gently asked if she could sit closer, moving inch by inch as the boy's breathing steadied in hesitant acceptance. The puppies watched her with cautious eyes, but their tails twitched, sensing she carried no darkness in her heart. She sat on the floor beside them, keeping her hands on her knees, letting the moment unfold naturally. The boy leaned slightly toward the puppies, drawing comfort from their steady warmth as the woman spoke softly. She told him she lived nearby, that she had heard the storm, and feared something terrible had happened inside the house. Her voice trembled as she admitted she couldn't walk away knowing a child might be alone in the cold night. The boy's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from hearing kindness he thought had vanished forever. He inched forward, just a little, the puppies following his movement, forming a protective arc behind him. The woman extended her hand slowly, palm open, offering not a command, but a choice he had the power to accept. He stared at it, trembling, searching for danger, but finding only warmth and the promise of safety. With a hesitant breath, he placed his tiny hand in hers, the puppies whining softly at the fragile connection forming. And in that single touch, the room shifted, pain loosening its grip as hope began to take root in his heart. The woman gently gathered the boy into her arms, careful not to unsettle the puppies that clung close to his feet. He didn't resist, only leaned into her chest, exhausted from days of fear, tears, and unbearable loneliness. The puppies followed closely as she carried him toward the door, determined to stay with him no matter where he went. She whispered soothing words, promising they wouldn't be separated, that she understood they were his family now. Outside, the sunlight felt warmer than before, as if welcoming the fragile new beginning unfolding before them. The puppies scampered around her feet, their tiny shadows dancing across the porch as they stuck close to the child. The boy clutched her coat tightly, feeling protected for the first time since the tragic day everything changed. The woman led them carefully to her home, a small cottage glowing with warmth and safety, he had long forgotten. She opened the door, letting light spill across the floor, inviting him into a world that didn't feel frightening. The puppies rushed in first, their tails wagging excitedly as if they knew they had finally found a safe place. The boy stepped inside hesitantly, his eyes wide as the warmth wrapped around him like a long-lost embrace. And as the door closed behind them, the past stayed outside, leaving only the soft promise of healing ahead. Days passed gently in the woman's home, filled with quiet meals, warm blankets, and the soft laughter returning to the boy. The puppies grew stronger, their clumsy steps turning into playful leaps that filled the cottage with life again. Every morning, the boy woke surrounded by tiny paws and wagging tails, each day pulling him further from the shadows. The woman watched over them, treating the boy with tenderness, and the puppies like the brave heroes they had become. She contacted the authorities, telling them she had found a child, but asked that he remain with her for now. They agreed, seeing how deeply he had bonded with the puppies that saved him from the darkest nights of his life. The boy began to speak again, his first word whispered softly as he hugged a golden pup. Safe. Tears filled the woman's eyes, knowing the puppies had healed him in ways no adult ever could have managed. Neighbors eventually learned the story, their hearts breaking as they heard how the tiny dogs protected him so fiercely. People brought food, toys, and blankets, turning the cottage into a sanctuary built from kindness and second chances. The boy, once lost in sorrow, now laughed freely, surrounded by the 5 little heroes who refused to let him fall. And from that day on, their bond became unbreakable, a family formed not by blood but by love, loyalty, and miracle.